Welcome back to our next panel, and this one is all about, you should have the title there, so all about looking at how AI and the data underlying AI can boost public sector productivity. And I think, as we all know, very clearly aware of the fact that public finances are incredibly tight at the moment, lots of pressure on the finances. So anything that we can do to kind of help improve efficiency and boost productivity, really, really important. And technology is going to be such a big part of that. We have got 4 fantastic speakers with us here today. I'm going to follow the same format as before. I'm going to introduce our speakers. I'm going to ask them each just to give a flavour from their organisations of what's already going on in terms of AI and data improving productivity. But then we're going to come to you for your questions and make this as much of a conversation as we can. So in terms of our panel, we've got Albert King with us, who is the Chief Data Officer for Digital and Security at NHS National Services in Scotland. We've got Amanda Svensson, who is Deputy Director for Applied Data and Insight at the UK Government's Communications Service, which is based in the Cabinet Office. We've got Stephen Burgess, who is Digital Transformation and Analytics Lead for SAS. And then we've got Shruti Kohli from DWP. So lovely to have the 4 of you here with us today. Albert, I'm going to kick off with you. And I'm going to say, one, can you give us a quick overview? Because I didn't know, I wasn't aware exactly of what NHS National Services in Scotland does. So can I ask you to do that very quickly first?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I often think National Services Scotland is NHS Scotland's best kept secret. So we deliver, kind of as the name suggests, I guess, lots of really high quality, important national services, right? So things like the blood transfusion service and screening programs and really exciting stuff like legal and procurement. But the great bit, the bit that I'm involved in, is delivering national digital and data solutions. So as the National Data Service for the NHS in Scotland, we really are the kind of beating heart of that data-driven NHS in Scotland. So we really make sure that the NHS has the high-quality kind of national data assets it needs, gets the right data to the right place at the right time for that kind of direct service and clinical delivery. And that means that we're relied upon day in, day out by literally tens of thousands of folks across the NHS in Scotland, the wider health and social care workforce, and of course places like government and academia and that wider public sector as well. So yeah, our data, our technology, our expertise and products are really all focused actually on actually empowering those workers, right? So whether they're data scientists out in the territorial health boards that are delivering those direct clinical care services, through to decision makers and frontline workers in care. And that's around everything from traditional MI through to statistics, advanced analytics and AI. So really at the heart of decision-making, strategic decision-making, operational decision-making and service delivery in NHS Scotland. And we really combine all of that with the capabilities in our things like our National Cyber Centre of Excellence, clinical informatics, to make sure that those things are being adopted and deployed in ways that are safe and appropriate, particularly in something as sensitive as healthcare.
Fascinating. I mean, it already gives you a snapshot of just how many areas that technology can be applied in. We will come on in a minute, but is there any particular examples you wanted to give of where you're already doing things differently and using kind of data and AI in ways that are already boosting productivity?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think about these things in sort of, I suppose, 3 broad areas, because, well, here's a secret, right? The NHS actually has quite a lot of administration and bureaucracy happening in the background. Don't tell anyone. And so there's a huge opportunity, I think, in that space. And it's not particularly sexy, right? But it's really key, I think, to unlocking productivity in the workforce. And if I think about clinicians, what we're starting to do is actually enable, and Ming was talking about this a bit earlier, a similar thing, is actually enable AI to automate things like generation of discharge letters and clinical recording. And when I listen to my clinical colleagues, they tell me a lot that they're having to spend more and more time on that. So there's huge opportunity both to boost productivity and improve I guess, the satisfaction of the workforce. There's a set of things around knowledge and intelligence and how we kind of model the impacts of events like COVID or policy interventions. And then there's a set of things really around, and this is, I suppose, the one that gets the headlines is those clinical use cases in, I don't know, radiology or various other exciting use cases. So I think about them in those kind of 3 broad areas.
Fab, thanks. So yeah, as you say, internal operations, automating some of those routine things, modelling systems and issues and processes, and then clinical use as well. So already 3 different areas where you can see this could be used. Thanks so much, Albert. Amanda, similarly, could you give us a very quick overview of the Government Communication Service and what kind of its role is at the centre there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Government Communication Service is the professional body for communicators in government, and we have over 7,000 members spread across almost 350 different organizations, departments, agencies, other public bodies. And I would say, importantly for this kind of audience that might not interact a lot with comms in government, that comms is so much more than just press office. We have 7 different disciplines, so everything from data and insights to marketing, external affairs. And communications for government is really one of the kind of 4 main levers. So you have taxation, legislation, regulation, and then communication that can really be a lever to affect behavior change out and drive public health and other areas.
And as we heard this morning already, communication around the use of data can be so important in building trust, so that's one of the issues. So are you already using data and AI in ways that's showing benefits for productivity?
Yeah, I think we have some really good examples that I wanted to share. And I think I'll start off with 2 really good examples that are from colleagues out in other places. So the first one, I think, is from NHS Blood and Transplant. So one of the challenges that they had after the pandemic and kind of a lot of fatigue in the cost of living crisis was that they were really struggling with recruiting blood donations. They needed about 4,300 every day. So they worked really creatively with our communications, with our marketing agencies to leverage appointment data, so anonymous data, but live data every day about where there was available appointments and where you could drive that. So they used that in digital advertising to upweight in cities and locations where there was more availability. And it led to an improvement of about 11% more sign-ups and savings of over 12%.
Fantastic. Are there people that kind of constantly thinking about where this could be used? This kind of,
Yeah, and when it comes to AI, from the center and the work that I'm leading with my team, we're very much focused on developing tools and things that can really benefit the whole membership, so all government communicators. So we're developing a generative AI tool for government communicators, and it's already been launched in private beta, so we have over 750 users already from 50 departments, and we're already seeing through those stages that we're taking it, through alpha and private beta, some really impressive productivity enhancements. So it's been designed and tailored and built in-house specifically for Government Communication Service. So it has use cases. We're working with the membership to create sort of out of the box something that makes it easier for people that are not maybe don't know how to use these tools. It can be quite intimidating to just have an empty box. So it kind of takes you through, I want to create a press release, I want to create a strategic plan, I need to evaluate my communications. And it takes you through that journey. And we've seen savings with the initial cohort of 60. Over 3 months, we saw savings of 740 hours, which if you scale it out, if every member on average has that, it's almost 4 weeks per year. Wow. For each member, so it's quite significant.
Yeah, fab. Thanks, Amanda. Stephen, I'm going to come on to you. With SAS, I mean, you work across the public sector with lots of different organisations. I think, in particular, you're doing a lot of work on the defence and kind of national security areas. So could you just give us a sense, I know you might not be able to go into lots of detail, but a sense of where AI is being used there already to kind of improve productivity?
Yeah, sure. And I think everybody recognises, you mentioned cost before, didn't you? Defence is currently undertaking what's called the Defence Spending Review. And what that is trying to seek to do is effectively look at where efficiencies can be gained across defence in order to meet budgetary targets. And what's happening there is naturally there's a lot of top-down pressure coming into suppliers like us to say, we need to get more value from your software. So we, SAS, are a data analytics company. We provide lots of capability and have done for, I guess, over 30 years now, maybe even 40 years across UK government. But ultimately, our role is to get value from data. And ultimately, if we're not doing that, then we're not doing our job as a key supplier. Coming back to defence. So there's a lot of top-down pressure on us in terms of how can we drive additional value? How can we return on investment, but ultimately how can we reduce cost? And that speaks for us right now as a shift from risk to productivity. So a number of work, do we talk about some areas of works at the moment? Yeah, great. So we've got, interestingly, we had the MOD with us yesterday at Marlow, and it was a community event where everybody actually came up and talked about the things that they were doing. Equally from an AI perspective, some innovations that we're driving at the moment is 3 things that we're doing. And I guess what you could describe some of this is around reducing cognitive burden. So we talk a lot about data, we talk about a lot of efficiencies, we talk a lot about productivity. The impact of that is people and the amount of work people are having to do to derive insight as part of a downstream decision. So the first one of those is around personnel. So the military, if anybody's from the military, but if you're a soldier, for example, every 2 years you're reassigned a post. That will be based on your skill set, priorities from a defence perspective, your preferences in terms of where you live or where you live or your own family circumstances and situations. And so if you do that across a large workforce, that's a lot of information and a lot of data that you need to bring together. So what we're facilitating is effectively the automatic ingest of that information. So again, removing pressure from people to have to actually bring all that together, but then using simulation techniques in order to facilitate assignments based on job roles, based on everything that I've just described. And the percentage in savings, percentage of productivity, which will naturally result in savings, is quite significant. Another area of work is around forecasting and time series forecasting, for example, which can be applied across many different use cases, such as defence commodities. That might be from socks, toilet paper, boots, anything in that sort of sense, right the way through to the reservists. So, what does my reservist plan look like in terms of the number of training days against my budget? So therefore what we're doing is looking at historical data and using time series analysis to actually look at the forward-looking forecast to say, actually, based on this budgetary mark, this is where you need to be. But we're also simulating is, what happens if there's a reduction in budget? What's the impact of that in the number of reservist days? You can sort of see there what that means from a defence perspective, being able to effectively manage that in order to facilitate budgetary requirements.
And do you think that a lot of the work that you do, maybe you're doing something with MOD, are the civil service good at transferring that knowledge across to other departments? Because it sounds like some of the things you're doing would have similarly a really good impact in other departments.
We were actually asked the same yesterday. So the Defence Infrastructure Organisation, they do a lot around, first of all, net zero. So they have to meet, quite stringent sustainability targets. They manage the landmass across military. Obviously, they've got some huge targets to meet. But one of the questions that they asked was, can we understand what other government departments are doing? So they're quite keen to get together in a wider community sense to one, I guess, share their experiences and what they've achieved, but equally to collaborate and understand what other government departments are doing.
Yeah, thanks. And then Shruti, so Craig, I think it was, in the opening session, highlighted DWP as a kind of front runner, I think, in using AI to kind of really reduce time and cost of some of the things that you do. So could you give us some examples of where you're already using AI, but also what are some of the challenges you think that are facing officials?
Yeah, sure. So, as Craig mentioned about white mail that is being used to understand the claimants better, I believe how we accelerate AI in DWP and, leverage it to improve our productivity and support claimants better, that's something we have really taken as the front runner. Me, myself, I'm the head of innovation and AI, and believe me, it's my day job, right? So last year, we started with a Lighthouse program where we did 5 test and learn exercises on 5 different spaces where we wanted to understand, can we help our work coaches to have a more quality time with the claimants when they are speaking to them in the appointment session rather than searching for policies and guidance in that particular time. We wanted to look that can we help our developers to quickly get documentation from the old codes, the legacy codes quickly, so that they could really recode it or use GenAI for that. And similarly, we wanted to support our case managers to understand, can they really, again, understand the evidences better So there's a long list where we really wanted to test and learn, like, how we could really use Gen AI. And our major objective till now has been, like, safely accelerated, how to see how can our staff be more productive, and at the same time how we could have a regular testing, evaluation, reiteration plan so that we could really foresee these challenges. So that Lighthouse program has now shaped up in a whole directorate where, like, we are still in the innovation and ideation my space. We are experimenting, accelerating, looking at the data challenges, but at the same time we have moved on to see how we could productionize some of these, right? So giving the example of the policy and guidance document, how work coaches can quickly get claimants answer, get right, guidance. That's something that is now being produced, like, and we are looking forward. And as of now, this is the POC A-Cubed is live in 4 job centers where our colleagues are using it, giving us a very reiterative feedback, and, like, around updation of policy and guidance, and, like, we are really looking. We strongly want to see that there is no PII information in it. We have started with the guidance documents which are in public spaces because we really want to make sure that we understand the technology very well before actually putting all the stakes there. But in the safe, and as I said, in the safe space, we are really looking forward that how we could really use these open source models with PII. What are the safeguards we need to maintain over there? So this has really helped us to bring our colleagues on board. So I would really say another challenge had been the culture and the fear, and, like, enthusiasm and fear. Both of them were part of the journey in the start. Some are too enthusiastic, who want to use it for everything. And there were some staff who really were very scared of it. So this was a key challenge. And by bringing our colleagues on board, especially with the building of A-Cubed and, and now the production, the MVP, it has really helped our colleagues to understand how that we are not just putting AI in front. You are the one who are going to make decisions. It's a human-assisted tool, and we are really getting a lot of feedback from them, which is helping us out. So I really feel it in coming 2-3 months or so, we will have a better story to tell where we will say that, okay, now this is live, and,
I mean, really interesting, because I think that issue about how do you facilitate innovation, really important. How do you bring all the different professions together and bring everybody kind of on that journey is really important. And you stress there as well the need to test, evaluate, and then revise. So you're constantly kind of revising as you go along. And I'm just curious, actually, who here in the room would say they are a kind of digital or a data expert? Could you put your hand up if you're kind of sitting in a digital or data profession? And who here thinks you're more another profession, so like a generalist policy maker or finance or something else? Okay, there's a lot of people in the room that are neither, which is interesting. I wonder what... Because I think it was interesting what you said about some people are overly enthusiastic and want to use AI for everything. Other people, when we do broader events quite often for all kind of professions, there's quite a lot of fear in the room of what's this going to mean for me and what's it going to mean for my job as well. Now, that's definitely something I think that maybe we can touch on. So thank you. You've all given us sort of a flavour of where it's already being used, but maybe some of the challenges, I think, that are facing officials. Who has any questions for anybody? Yes, so there's a gentleman down here, if we could have... Has anyone got the next questions? We can get the microphone over to you while we're hearing this question. But yeah, and then gentleman behind there, thanks. So gentleman here.
Hello. So I've been trying to use AI recently. It is just an off-the-shelf sort of co-pilot AI, and in using it, I've been trying to make me more efficient. The problem I have is that you have to talk to it in a very, very specific way. And I guess I have two kind of questions listening to like the presentations that we've had so far about how AI has been useful. Do we think do we think that learning how to talk to AI is going to be a new skill set that we will need to develop? Or do we think that AI will just naturally get better to the state where it doesn't matter? Or do we think that the actual treasure trove of productivity is going to be in bespoke products that are designed to do a specific thing rather than Copilot type tools that help us do everything?
So this is a really good question. So you're asking, do all civil servants, regardless of what profession and how kind of tech you are yourself, should we be teaching civil servants how to use generative AI, right? You're talking about the ChatGPT kind of things. Is this something now that we should be teaching people?
I sort of very enthusiastically want to answer that question. So in GCS, in the Government Communication Service, one of the key things really that we kind of decided on very early as we were thinking about developing our generative AI tool was the importance of training. So it's actually, we have an AI for Communicators course, which is actually prerequisite to be able to use our tool. So it also talks about, what it's good at, what it's not good at, the biases, the things you need to know, but very tailored. And then we have intro, like an intro call. We talk about the prompt engineering, but also how we design the tool is very much like creating that kind of the prompt engineering, the way you have to talk to it. We have over 50 different templates that are already there that you can just use and that have been optimized in a way, and then you just input your information, but you don't need to kind of figure out exactly what the formula is, so to speak. And we've also had some really good feedback that by being able to see how it was phrased, then you can learn. So we kind of see the user journey a lot about using the pre-made ones and then kind of, I don't quite find what I need to do, and having the open chat box, apologies. But another thing we've also really, really thought about, and we're working very actively, Strand, within the development of Assist, that's the tool's name. So we're very conscious that the productivity gains are not just going to happen magically as soon as you put it out there. You have to kind of think about the user journey and take people with you. And we know from many kind of national polls already, there's roughly about a third really enthusiastic, a third are kind of open to it, and a third are kind of either agnostic or sort of don't want it or actively really don't want to join. And so we think a lot about the communications profession as a whole and the importance of not leaving people behind and the changes that could have. So we work a lot with our Skills and Standards program, with Skills and Standards team, and thinking about how can we support everyone. So we also, I have some brilliant behavioral scientists in my team, so they're also really involved. So we're developing have developed a new model really, so that we're going to be publishing soon. So it's Adopt, Sustain, Optimize. Really thinking about the user journeys. How can we pinpoint the points where it feels scary, where it's difficult, where for any reason it's difficult, and then try to remove those blockers so it becomes really available for everyone and provide that help along the way.
Thanks. Anyone else want to come in on the?
Yeah, sure.
Shruti, then Stephen. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Sure. Just wanted to say that to bring our colleagues on board, it was very important to give them that training. So we have now got kind of an enablement function within our directorate who are actually going to do that. Just on Copilot, it has really improved with time. We have really seen it from last July, where it hallucinated a lot, but now, so yes, these AI models are going to improve. But as we rolled out ACube, the POC for policy and guidance, we made sure that our colleagues understand that it is assistant. It's just like, another team member who is going to make mistakes, and you really need to make sure that you have a confidence in that before you are actually using it. And there's a thumbs up and thumbs down functionality we put, so that is the kind of insights we can capture. So I don't think so we are still there, or in a interim period we will be there where we can say just blindly think AI is giving you right, and definitely you need that prompt training to make sure that you are able to get what you want.
Thanks, Stephen.
I think the other part on a Copilot perspective, it's like, do you trust the output of what it's giving you? And there's a lot of conversation. I think we've all gone from like DevOps to model ops, and there's now this sort of, I guess, rightly next iteration referred to as Gen AI ops. And what that effectively means is, you know, your IT department as an example, or you as an individual, being able to look at the output of a model. I'm talking about an online model in this instance. When I say online, because you're interacting directly with it, and actually trying to decipher and understand whether actually you believe what it's giving you. And interestingly, we saw. So I've spent 20 years like in the supply space, working in the sector that I'm in, but responding to client requirements, whether that's in the form of a POC, whether it's in form of a bid from an RFP perspective. And we've seen a lot of emerging requirements now that are coming out, basically saying, can you please validate what part of your response has been written by an AI? And can you validate that actually that has been written, that the feature, product, gain, experience is valid? And that's going to not bring to bear risk. So there's a number of dimensions, as well as you trusting as well as you being able to prompt it and speak, you know, the King's English, which is what we laughed about yesterday. And somebody said, that's a challenge. And I said, is that a positive or a negative? You know, in that sort of sense, because you may use that notion and the model might not understand it. But yeah, coming back round, there's lots of other emerging areas of work to ensure that trust, responsibility, ethics, and all those things are applied to any outcome, really, which you need to think about as well, I think.
Thanks.
No, if I could just add, I mean, I would echo what others have said around, you know, things like the importance of bringing the whole workforce with us, and the importance of kind of organisational design and service design, and not just dropping an AI tool into a context without addressing those issues. Stepping back from that, what I think is really interesting as well is what that questions that asks for the skill system and our education system, because as we, you know, we're having to learn some of these things, right? And we're going to have to tackle some of those things. But I think there's also a really important question about how we start to equip people coming out of our schools and out of our education system and universities and colleges with the skills as they join our workforce, just as we have, I guess, in the past with other digital tools and technologies. And I think it's a really great question that you asked. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks. And we had another gentleman question there.
Oh, yeah, hi, Paul Fox from DE&S. We've released a couple of, quite a few like generative AIs. But I'm just interested in actually how we may sort of look at how productive measures actually are being collected, because we've started this, we've released about 8 generative bots, comparison bots, and now we're sort of going, great, amazing, how fantastic. They're going, now, what's the benefit realization? You go, yeah, because it's not just sort of easy to sort of say, well, okay, you can capture it in hours. It's about the sort of how much loss of wait time, or all those other sort of attributes of how that the information got to that user much quicker. But we're sort of penciling around at the moment with like 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes each user, but it feels like we're just messing around at the moment. So I just thought, have you got any thoughts on that? How to actually capture how productivity has been gained by the AI you've implemented?
I like this question, because is this even a question about technology, or is this a question about how do we evaluate any policy anyway, and shouldn't we be thinking about that from the start before we kind of roll something out? But is there anything in particular about AI? Yeah,
it's a business value question, isn't it, ultimately? And we spend a lot of our time in the business value part of our conversation in terms of, all right, yes, you've got this great idea, but ultimately, what does it really, really mean? Whether it's efficiency, whether it's productivity, does that result in a reduced cost? It's a shame my colleague Rob McManus from our business value team isn't here, because he would give you the right answer to the question effectively. But I think that's what you're doing, aren't you? How long did it take me from that as is to be state and the bit in the middle? How long does this now take me? But effectively, what you've got to do is surface that right the way across the organisation and understand what the gain is across the organisation. We're doing quite a bit of work on it at the moment. I can't give you a direct answer, unfortunately, but I'll hand over.
Yeah, Albert.
Well, yeah, I suppose it's a really interesting question. It's actually one of the things that's kind of been focusing my mind recently, because we need to be really purposeful about where we sort of make interventions and deploy AI and make sure it's, given the constraints on resources, making sure it's releasing the greatest gains in terms of productivity and benefits. And actually measuring productivity, I don't know what others' experience is, but measuring productivity in a public sector context, I think can be a pretty tricky challenge in and of itself. It certainly is in health, and it's not as simple as just comparing inputs and outputs, and you start to think about all the complexities around, well, as we start to make changes to the broader system, maybe we introduce something like flow navigation centres and redirect people away from certain services and into other services. How do we actually understand productivity in a public health, in a public sector context, and certainly in health, it's really tricky. So the first thing is, the importance of investment in those data foundations to make sure that we have the high quality data that we need to understand and underpin that kind of analysis is really fundamental. And there were some good conversations earlier about kind of data foundations. But the second observation I would make, and a neat little bit of circularity, is that AI can also help us with that. So I was talking about earlier about the kind of work we've done around building that almost like sort of digital twin of our health and social care system and that whole system modelling. And we can start to actually look at what it actually means to introduce changes into those kind of clinical pathways and patient pathways and model the impacts of those things. And so they do give us a bit of insight into strategically where we're going to place those bets and make those investments to make sure that we get the greatest impact and actually get to the best kind of patient outcomes. So AI is both the question and the answer.
Amanda.
I don't know, how tough AI is the answer to AI. So when it comes to Gen AI, which I think you also asked about, we definitely have thought a lot about it, and we're in the process. So I'm not, we sort of with that caveat that we definitely don't have all the answers. But yeah, we do think about it a lot, and kind of making the distinction between creating efficiencies, which is creating time savings, and productivity, which is using that time saved either for more products or for higher quality of what you're producing. So we're thinking a lot about how can we not just measure the time, but also quality, and thinking about how can we actually, we're thinking about like we're creating workshops where we're inviting people and actually doing tasks and seeing quality and things like that, we're following best practice there. So that we think about those things. But there's another element as well to think about. There's this kind of two elements. One is you could also use that time for kind of more human tasks, so more collaboration, more training, and more things like that. So how, and that's kind of the area where I would say where we definitely haven't quite reached into, like how would we measure the productivity improvements that come from that increased interaction that we have between colleagues. And then lastly as well, an important consideration that we do think about is that as we start to automate kind of the simpler tasks and leaving the more complex ones to humans, we as humans can also get overloaded by complex tasks. So it's known from studies that you can usually only kind of do complex tasks for about 3 or 4 hours, and most people like a combination of simple and complex tasks. So we're also thinking a lot about what does that mean in terms of productivity if we automate away all the simple tasks. So it's a lot to think about, and I don't think anyone has cracked how to measure that whole system. But it's definitely something we're thinking about, and happy to, if anyone wants to reach out and you have ideas on it, please do.
It does throw up some huge questions. Will we all be moving to a 4-day week, for example? I'm all for it.
Thanks very much indeed. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Other questions? Yes, we have a lady down here and then there. We'll take these last two questions. If you could keep your hand up, the lady there. Yeah, thank you. And the gentleman over there. We'll take both these and they'll be the last two questions. Thanks. There and then the gentleman there. Thanks. Okay.
Hi. For the various tools you have developed, do you see perhaps the tool being adopted by other departments for similar or related purposes? And if so, what challenges do you foresee in terms of local adaptation of the tool by maybe, say, a different organization with different culture or even, say, data readiness?
Thanks. So a question there that picked up a bit on what I asked Stephen. So some of the tools that you've mentioned that you're already using in your departments or organisations, are you talking to other departments in other parts of the civil service or the public sector about using them, and what are some of the challenges? And I'm going to take the second question as well, and you can answer one or both. So the second question there.
Simon Taylor at HMRC. There's been a lot of narrative recently about sort of the potential of AI productivity for the public sector. And a lot of it comes from a very top-down view of the function of government, the size of the public sector. But how can we translate that sort of high-level, sort of top-down potential into actual functional things and that strategic sort of journey? Because I think you've got one big number, but what that actually means and how we then prove we're actually achieving that goal.
So just to unpick that a little bit. So we've got a top-down kind of vision, are you saying, for how we use AI, but you're not yet clear on how that filters down to using it kind of on a day-to-day basis. Is that right? Okay, fantastic. Okay. Stephen,
can I answer both questions?
Yeah, sure. Very quickly. I think I'm being told we've got about 5 minutes left.
So in terms of reuse, if we take a simulation, so an optimization model, for example, and that in its simplistic terms is one that's been around for a very long time called the travelling salesman problem. So how do I optimize Steve's journey to get from A to Z? That's a generic model, and that generic model can be applied to lots and lots of different situations. So that for us, and that was one of the questions that we were asked today, is can we reuse what we've developed, which I think is your point, and therefore share that across our community. And we're seeing that, and actually we're going to market with a lot of, we've labelled it as models as a service, effectively, so all the things that we've learned over a 40-year history, how we can then effectively put those into a digital marketplace for customers, and a lot of the hyperscalers are doing that as well. So it's a real thing that I think value. From your question's perspective, down to the ground, how do we think about this and how do we apply it? And one approach that we take is through that sort of minimum viable product approach. We sort of take an idea, we think about that in terms of the business value, in terms of productivity, efficiency and savings, but then we present that from a user perspective and say, what does this mean to you in your everyday life? And actually, how might you interact with this model? And I said about an online or an offline model before. So as an intelligence investigator, as an example, how I might interact with the software through document extraction. So I've got a whole bunch of documents. What I need to do today is look across all those and identify where they may be a risk, subject of interest. Actually, what I can do is use a process called natural language, which will allow me to extract entities from that document or from those series of documents and present those back to you as a single person. So I think coming back to it for me, which is what we always try and do, is bring that to the user, understand what their experience is, and demonstrate that in terms of capability, and therefore what that means to them, but ultimately how they get value. But what it always has to do is it always has to have alignment to the top level strategy. Because if it's not got alignment to the top level strategy, it's just an idea. You don't get stakeholder buy-in, you won't get funding for future investment, etc., which is really important, I think.
So there is something, again, it comes back to that communication as well about the end-to-end process.
Absolutely.
What it means for everybody.
What it means for everybody, yeah.
Shriti, would you like to answer one or both?
Yeah, sure. Happy to take both. So running Innovation Lab from 5-6 years, knowledge sharing and cross-government, right from synthetic data, process mining, and now in AI, we are really on top of that. For AI, even we went to number 10 to tell them that how we have actually done these test and learn exercises, and also shared our notes with CDDO, HMRC, MOJ, like you name the departments. Because, for example, starting with A cubed, the policy guidance, which is the simplest one, how we could really, make it like a cross-government common component. So yeah, we are really on top of it. And to the question of top to down to the value, actually making it happen, that's what really, with these test and learn exercises, we have really seen that how we could really bring together. So we have got our ministers, we have got our directors, director generals, who have got what they think AI can help in. And then we do like very quick 8 to 12 week sprints where we really get the functional group, the working group on board. Every week we do those sprint designs. And before we wrap up, we do that initial testing where we actually give that to the hand of the user, right? Right today, also, there is one of the user testing happening with, some of the work coaches and getting that feedback. And once we finish the POC and, for example, A cubed, as it is landing in the production and is being done, again, it is very iterative where actually some of our colleagues who are going to use it are part of the team who are really, and then we have got a full-fledged team of evaluation, the social analysts, who are really user researchers working very closely to get their feedback so that they feel this tool is for them, to support them. It's not just something that has landed to them and they have to use it.
So in some ways, the questions are connected because there's a joining up across departments kind of horizontally, but there's a need to bring everybody in vertically as well in the process co-design. Amanda and then Albert, I'm going to come to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo a lot of what's been said. So I think, yeah, I mean, from our perspective, actually, Shrut and I just realized we have been, not just realized, before, like, we have connected around Gen AI before. Like, we are connecting across the different departments and meeting the teams that are doing it. Or we've been kind of in close collaboration in terms of kind of the back end that side of things with the Red Box team, for instance. And a lot of the conversations is, can we, you know, is the technology, is the things that we can be sharing, code sharing, etc. Are we trying to do the same thing, yes or no, or how should we, what are our use cases? And that, it really comes back, I think, to that. We do a lot of kind of engagement with the users of the tool and user research and getting feedback, and that's kind of one of the kind of trade-offs you get when you join an early tool. You get access to it, but you also you get to form part of shaping it as well, and it's really important. We really rely on that, and we've also taken a lot of care, I would say, in the early stages of selecting users so that we have a really good representative sample, and also making sure that we have users who have accessibility needs, so that, and we're engaging with the accessibility networks in our departments as well to make sure that we are building a tool that works for everyone. So yeah, I think it's a lot of that kind of sharing and making sure that we're developing the right thing to make sure that it's helpful to people. I mean, that is ultimately the goal.
That issue of inclusivity, one that's really important when we're talking about some of these new technologies. And Albert, we started with you, so I'm going to give you the final say on this.
Awesome, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I think the question about sharing is really, really interesting, because I guess I've been working in the public sector for a few years now, and in all honesty, I'm not sure it's something we've been great at in the past. I do wonder whether there's a bit of a change just now. Conditions are right, actually, for us to maybe get a bit better at that. And you know, I agree with what Elizabeth said about kind of shared patterns and solutions in this space. What I'm seeing in Scotland is certainly that we've got a bit of a focus on, if you like, sharing across the foundations, actually, that are the enabling layer that I think is going to enable us to kind of adopt AI. So that kind of data infrastructure, common platforms, skills, you know, common approaches to information governance and building capacity and capability around IG and decision making, and indeed data governance. So I think our focus is largely on that kind of enabling layer, those foundations, and making sure we have common approaches to that and common platforms. But yeah, I'm sure I'd agree with others as well that there's lots of shared platforms, so shared patterns as well that we can share.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I mean, lots of food for thought there, but really interesting to hear about some of the ways that AI is already being used. And I think there's just huge potential to come, but we need to bear in mind all of the challenges and the risks that it throws up. Thank you. Please join me in saying, and again, a very warm thanks to our fantastic panel here today. Thank you so much.